In October 1956, a 13-year-old Bobby Fischer sat across from Donald Byrne at the Rosenwald Memorial Tournament. What followed would become known as the Game of the Century, a game that showcases a young Fischer's extraordinary vision, calculation, and boldness. The game opens with knight to f3 from Byrne, a flexible move. Fischer responds in kind with knight to f6. Byrne continues with pawn to c4, claiming central space, and Fischer replies with pawn to g6, setting up to fianchetto his bishop. Next, knight to c3 from Byrne builds central pressure. Fischer follows with bishop to g7. Then comes pawn to d4, strengthening white's center. Fischer castles, king to safety early. Byrne develops bishop to f4, avoiding sharper lines. Fischer counters aggressively with pawn to d5, signaling the Grunfeld defense. Byrne applies pressure with queen to b3, targeting both the b7 and d5 squares. Then Fischer surprises. Pawn takes c4, giving up central presence momentarily, but drawing Byrne's queen to an exposed square. Queen recaptures on c4, and Fischer follows with pawn to c6, reinforcing d5 and preparing development. Byrne goes further with pawn to e4, building a dominant pawn center. Fischer calmly brings in knight to d7. Byrne places rook to d1, supporting the center, though perhaps not the best use of tempo. Fischer strikes with knight to b6, attacking the queen. Byrne retreats the queen to c5, an aggressive but exposed position. Fischer now develops bishop to g4, pinning the knight on f3. Then Byrne pushes bishop to g5, a move that invites what happens next. Fischer unleashes knight to a4, a brilliant blow. It threatens the queen and the knight on c3, undermining Byrne's entire central structure. The room reportedly stirred as observers rushed to see what this 13-year-old had found. Byrne tries to stay active with queen to a3. Fischer continues. Knight takes c3, removing a crucial defender. Byrne recaptures with pawn takes c3. Then Fischer crashes through with knight takes e4. Now the center is under fire, and Fischer is in full control. Byrne grabs the chance to fork the queen, and rook with bishop takes a7, but Fischer ignores the threat and plays queen to b6, poised, calm, and ready to strike harder. Byrne brings out his bishop to c4, maybe hoping to castle by hand. Fischer responds with knight takes c3, clearing the e-file and threatening rook activity. Byrne tries bishop to c5, attacking Fischer's queen and seemingly rescuing his position. But Fischer sees deeper. He plays rook to a8 with check. Byrne is forced to play king to f1, the only safe move. Then comes the second thunderbolt, bishop to e6. Fischer leaves his queen hanging. Is this madness or genius? Byrne accepts the challenge and captures the queen with bishop takes b6. But Fischer is ready. Bishop takes c4 with check, and it's all downhill from here. This sets up what's known as a windmill, a repeating tactical sequence of checks that picks apart Byrne's position. King to g1. Fischer plays knight to e2 with check. The king is dragged back to f1. Fischer continues. Knight takes d4 with check, forcing the king back again. Then knight to e2 with check, a relentless pendulum. The king returns to f1, and Fischer plays knight to c3 with check, simultaneously attacking the rook on d1. King goes back to g1. Now Fischer takes pawn captures b6, recovering his lost material and setting up threats against both queen and rook. Byrne tries to save himself with queen to b4, eyeing the bishop. Fischer calmly plays rook to a4, defending the bishop and threatening the queen. Byrne plays queen takes b6, at least grabbing a pawn. But Fischer strikes. Knight takes rook on d1. He now has two bishops, a rook, and a pawn for a queen, plus total board control. Byrne plays pawn to h3, and Fischer responds with rook takes a2. From here, Fischer mops up. Knight to f2, rook to e1, queen trade avoided. The rest of the game unfolds with clinical precision. Byrne's forces are too scattered to resist. Eventually, Fischer delivers checkmate with rook to c2. Game over. A masterpiece at just 13 years old. Bobby Fischer didn't just win this game. He announced himself to the world. Every move, every sacrifice, every combination showed that this kid wasn't just good. He was extraordinary.